When our HOA president tasered my mom over a navy blue mailbox, she had no idea she had just assaulted Cumberland County's top prosecutor, someone who had taken down crime bosses and murderers for 15 years. What happens when the most feared legal mind in the state decides your corrupt homeowners association is her next big case? I jumped when our doorbell rang at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Who visits this early? I peeked through the window to see Cynthia Reynolds, our HOA president, tapping her foot impatiently on our welcome mat. Her bright red fingernails matched her lipstick as she clutched a piece of paper. Mom was still in her pajamas, sipping coffee when she opened the door. I hung back in the hallway watching. "Catherine, this is a violation notice," Cynthia announced without saying hello. She thrust the paper into Mom's hand. "Your mailbox color is not approved. The fine is $47, due by next Friday." Mom glanced at our newly painted navy blue mailbox by the curb. "What exactly is wrong with it?" "It violates HOA Code 39.2b. All external fixtures must use approved colors," Cynthia said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness adults use when they're being mean but pretending not to be. "I checked the guidelines before painting," Mom replied calmly. "There's no list of banned colors." Cynthia's smile disappeared. "The board knows unapproved colors when we see them. Navy isn't on our approved list." "May I see this list?" Mom asked. "It's in our internal documents. Pay the fine or repaint it white by Friday." Cynthia turned and strutted away, her heels clicking on our walkway. Mom closed the door, looking at the notice. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. As Cumberland County's top prosecutor for 15 years, she handled murderers and gang bosses, not silly arguments about mailbox colors. I helped Mom make pancakes while she told me stories about the courthouse. "In my job, Jamie, evidence matters. Facts matter. Not just because someone important says so." Just then, cars started arriving next door. Mrs. Winters was hosting another loud garden party, her third this month. Her guests parked, blocking half our driveway, and soon music blasted so loud our windows rattled. "Should we call someone?" I asked. "They're breaking noise rules and those cars are blocking us in." Mom sighed. "Let's document it first." She took photos of the cars and used her phone to measure the noise level with an app. 78 dB. Way over the 65 allowed by HOA rules. Through our kitchen window, I spotted Cynthia arriving at the party. She hugged Mrs. Winters, accepted a drink, and then both women looked toward our house, laughing. My stomach felt worse seeing that. "Mom, look," I whispered. She watched for a minute. "Interesting. Selective enforcement might be happening here." That afternoon, she wrote a polite email requesting the architectural guidelines that mentioned mailbox colors. "Always start by assuming it's just a mistake," she told me. "Never jump to thinking people are being deliberately unfair." Monday passed with no response. Tuesday too. On Wednesday, another notice appeared on our door. Now a $120 fine for failure to comply promptly with the violation notice. Mom called the HOA office 4 times. Each time they transferred her to voicemail. On her 5th call, someone finally answered. "HOA office, how can I help you?" a bored voice said. "This is Catherine Morgan at 1872 Pinewood Drive. I'm calling about 2 fines I've received regarding my mailbox, and I'm requesting a copy of the color guidelines." "That information is only available at board meetings," the voice replied. "When is the next meeting?" "It was yesterday. The next one is in 2 months. Mom's lawyer face appeared. The calm, focused look I knew meant trouble for someone. Not angry, just determined. "I'll need to speak with Cynthia directly then. She's very busy this week." The call suddenly disconnected. That evening, Mrs. Winters' teenage son threw a football that knocked over our garden gnome, shattering it. When Mom went over to discuss it politely, Mrs. Winters claimed she didn't see anything happen and shut the door in Mom's face. As Mom swept up the broken pieces, a shiny black SUV parked in front of our house. Cynthia emerged with 2 men in polo shirts, with HOA board member embroidered on them. "Catherine," Cynthia called out, walking onto our property without asking. "These fines need immediate attention. We're here to collect payment." "I've been trying to reach you for days," Mom replied. "I need to see the section that prohibits navy blue specifically." The taller man stepped forward. The board has discretion to determine aesthetic violations. Pay now, or we'll place a lien on your property. Mom stood straight, suddenly looking like she did in the courtroom. Are you an attorney, sir? Because placing a lien requires specific legal procedures, not just threats on someone's front lawn. The man's face reddened. Cynthia cut in. We know the law, Catherine. You have 3 days to pay both fines, plus a $25 late fee. Otherwise, things will become very unpleasant for you. As they walked away, I whispered, Mom, don't they seem like bullies? She watched them go, her expression thoughtful. Yes, but bullies usually pick on people they think won't fight back. She pulled out her phone, took pictures of our mailbox from multiple angles, and then called her assistant at the prosecutor's office. Derek, I need a favor. Can you pull property records for Pinecrest Gardens HOA? Also, any complaints filed against them in the last 5 years? Thanks. She turned to me with a little smile. Let's see if other neighbors have had similar problems. Knowledge is power, Jamie. That night, I heard Mom on the phone with Judge Wilson, her old law school friend. She rarely brought work home, but something about her voice told me this mailbox thing was becoming much more than a simple fine. I fell asleep wondering what would happen in 3 days when the payment was due. Little did I know, our quiet life in Pinecrest Gardens was about to explode. What secret was Cynthia hiding that made her so desperate to control every detail of our neighborhood? Was non-standard, and a third about the authorized occupancy of our garden gnome. Replacement Mom just laughed, which wasn't the reaction I expected. They're getting desperate, she said. They know I'm not backing down. That night I couldn't sleep thinking about the meeting. What would happen when Mom confronted Cynthia with all her evidence? And why was our little navy blue mailbox worth all this trouble? I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, our quiet neighborhood dispute would turn into something that would make the evening news across the entire state. Would Mom's years of putting away dangerous criminals prepare her for what Cynthia was willing to do to protect her secret real estate scheme? I felt my heart pounding as we walked into the packed community center. Cynthia sat at the front table like a queen on her throne, whispering and laughing with Mrs. Winters while pointing at us. The room went silent when we entered, 50 neighbors suddenly very interested in their shoes. You shouldn't have come, whispered Mr. Rodriguez, our friendly neighbor from across the street. Cynthia's been bragging all day about how she's going to make an example of your family. Mom squeezed my hand. That's exactly why we're here. When Mom signed up to speak, Cynthia rolled her eyes. The sign-up sheet mysteriously disappeared right after 6 people spoke about garden gnome regulations and pool hours. Before Cynthia tried to end the meeting, an elderly man in the back called out, "We still have speakers on the list. Catherine Morgan hasn't had her turn." Mom walked confidently to the microphone. She looked different tonight. Not just my mom, but Prosecutor Morgan, the woman criminals feared. My name is Catherine Morgan. I've lived in Pinecrest Gardens for 8 years, and I'm here to address the false fines against my property and the pattern of harassment my family has experienced. Cynthia's face turned red. This isn't on the agenda. According to HOA Bylaw Section 4.3, residents may address grievances during open comments, Mom replied, holding up the rule book. I've documented 17 instances of selective enforcement, including. Cynthia slammed her hand on the table. Your 3 minutes are up. I just started speaking, Mom said calmly. Actually, she's only spoken for 20 seconds, said the elderly man, holding up his phone timer. Cynthia stood up, her voice shaking. You're disrupting this meeting with baseless accusations. I'm calling security. 2 large men wearing black polo shirts with HOA enforcement patches emerged from a side door. One had a flashlight, the other a belt with pepper spray, handcuffs, and something I couldn't quite see. Miss Morgan, you need to leave now, said the larger man, grabbing Mom's arm roughly. Take your hands off me, Mom said, her voice steady but firm. I have the legal right to speak at this meeting. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Phones came out as neighbors started recording. She's becoming hostile, Cynthia announced loudly. Remove her immediately. I am not hostile, Mom replied. I am exercising my rights as a homeowner too. It happened so fast. The second guard pulled something from his belt, a small black device with 2 metal prongs. There was a cracking sound like electricity, and suddenly Mom's body went stiff. The taser wires connected to her chest, and she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking violently. I screamed and ran to her. "Stop it! Stop hurting her!" Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Guzman from 2 doors down shouted, "Call 911." 3 neighbors rushed forward to help Mom. Cynthia stood at her table, completely unmoved. "Our security team is authorized to use reasonable force when homeowners become threatening," she said. "She was just talking." I shouted through tears, holding Mom's hand as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes were wide with shock and pain. The security guard who tasered her smirked. "Should have paid your fines, lady." Mr. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd. "Are you insane? You can't taser someone for speaking at a meeting." "She was aggressive," Cynthia insisted as shocked neighbors began yelling. I felt threatened. I watched Mom's face change as she caught her breath. Her eyes narrowed and I recognized that look. The same one she got before walking into court to face the worst criminals in Cumberland County. "Phone," she whispered to me, her voice shaky but determined. "Back pocket. Call Judge Wilson." Then Detective Ramirez. "Who exactly did you just assault?" Mrs. Gomez asked Cynthia loudly. "Do you even know who she is?" Cynthia waved her hand dismissively. "Just another entitled homeowner who thinks rules don't apply to her." "That's Cumberland County Chief Prosecutor Catherine Morgan," Mr. Rodriguez announced. "The woman who took down the West Side Gang and sent 3 corrupt politicians to prison last year." The security guards exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered something to Cynthia, whose smug smile vanished instantly. Sirens wailed in the distance as paramedics rushed in to check on Mom. I heard her whisper something that sent chills down my spine. "I've been looking for my next big case," she murmured. "Looks like I just found it."